Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's great. We are, if my math is correct, actually doing more than one show per day this week, so we must be getting into the heart of college football season because there's too much to talk about to contain us to just one episode per day.
You know, Jim Tressel used to say it, September is for pretenders, November is for podcasts.
And they don't let just anyone do a podcast. This is very exclusive company, so...
Yeah, you've got to go to school for that. You've got to get a learner's permit. Then you've got to get a driver's permit to drive a show. And then boom, profit. So here we are. Tom, what are we doing today?
Well, we did a couple shows last week. I think we did 2 Buckeye Weeklies and maybe one Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning show as well, where we were answering listener questions. We put out a call for listener questions about the Ohio State-Michigan game and just in general, the vibe of the two teams or whatever it was as we sort of headed into November. And, sometimes you put out a call for questions and you get 3. And sometimes you put out a call for questions and you get like 4 episodes worth. So here is episode number 4 of us answering your questions about the Ohio State-Michigan game. Thank you very much. And the next time we put out a call for questions, please send in 4 shows again. This is, we are not here to hear ourselves talk, which is... Despite what you may think, we are not just here to hear ourselves talk. We're also here to do stuff that is interesting to you, and by letting us know what is interesting to you, that makes it easier for us to do things that are interesting for you. All right, here's the first one from @HopsLaw. How confident/nervous should the respective fan bases be based on the history of the team that wins the rushing battle winning the game?
Tom, I can tell you from my interactions with Michigan fans on Twitter and social media, they have very few concerns about their ability to run the ball and thus seem very confident that that Michigan is going to win this game. And conversely, Ohio State fans right now have very little reason to be confident that they are going to run the ball all that well. Probably not confident enough to think that they're going to run the ball well on Michigan, but you can run the ball poorly and still win, Tom, as you know, as long as the other team runs the ball more poorly. And so then it becomes a matter of, can Ohio State's defense keep Michigan to what, like a 3.2 yards per carry type of thing? And Ohio State slides in there with a nice 3.3 to win that yards per carry battle that we know is so important.
Well, I was just pulling the stats up right now. Yards per carry, Michigan is one of the best defenses in the country. They're 6th in the country, 2.73 yards per carry allowed. Ohio State all the way back at 2.92 yards per carry allowed, 10th in the nation. And so, Michigan has not. I'm just going to take a quick look through the teams. Iowa was ahead of them, and Michigan did not exactly run the ball like crazy against Iowa. Illinois is ahead of Ohio State, and that's it. And then you go, I'm just scrolling down through the bottom. Rutgers, Michigan hasn't played them yet, but teams have not run the ball super well against Rutgers. And Maryland is 25th in the country. So that's it. I mean, Michigan has not faced great rush defenses this year. So I don't, Michigan is a very good running team, but it's, if Ohio State was exclusively facing terrible pass defenses, you think you would take that into account in terms of how good is Ohio State's pass offense. And Michigan, obviously, if you're going based solely on this and you assume that there is forever going to be a 1-to-1 correlation of team that runs the ball for more yards per carry wins the game 100% of the time, which has been the case for close to 2 decades now, then yes, Michigan fans should be feeling very optimistic. But if Michigan is not able to run the ball, if Ohio State's not able to run the ball at all, and Michigan's not able to run the ball nearly as much, if Michigan outrushes Ohio State 3.2 to 1.8, or even 4.0 to 2.2, Ohio State is far more capable of throwing the ball and, making some explosive plays in the passing game than I think Michigan is. So, and, I think in our next question we'll get into this, but, I don't think even the most, optimistic Michigan fan would say, if it comes down to throwing, give me JJ McCarthy over CJ Stroud. I don't think anyone's going to take that. So, yes, J.J. McCarthy can run the ball a lot better than C.J. Stroud can. But if it really does come down to passing the ball, well, that's probably, in favor of Ohio State. So this is, as I always love to say, if you tell me this one stat, I will tell you who wins the game. Tony, tell me how many yards per carry Michigan runs for. If it's 5.5 or something like that, I think Michigan probably wins the game. If it's 4.2 or 3.8, I think Ohio State is probably winning the game. And with as good as the Ohio State rush defense has been this year, I think they are going to really focus on shutting down that run and make J.J. McCarthy be the one who beats them. And, if the weather's good and it comes down to passing, I think I would put my money on Ohio State there.
Yeah, like I think the last thing I wrote in this past week's Michigan Monday is sell out to stop the run and make J.J. McCarthy beat you. If he does, at least you can sleep at night. Because you already know what Michigan does well, so if you allow that to continue, then that's it's a lack of institutional control, Tom. I don't know if the NCAA would agree, but I don't know how else you could describe it. But yeah, I don't know what that number is, but I think I don't care if you outrush Ohio State 3.6 yards per carry to 2.3 or something like that. Like that doesn't feel like enough to me, because you're talking like that's 130 yards rushing. Penn State rushed for 111 and they lost, by 14 or whatever. I think you need to get up into that 5 yard per carry where it's, because you're figuring Michigan is going to run the ball 40 times if they can. So if you get to that 200 yard mark and you've got 40 carries to be consistent and you're getting 5.1, 5.2 where it's, and it's not because of a 96 yard Blake Corum run to boost everything, then you should be concerned. I think anything short of 5, I don't think it's an automatic thing. I think once you get over 5, it starts to become more automatic. The higher every 10th point, every decimal point makes it even higher.
Yeah, I mean, if you're at 6, I'd put it at about 95% chance that Michigan wins. But if it 5.2, it's you're probably better than 50-50, but still not a guarantee. Speaking of not a guarantee, from @Ivor Lukash, if Michigan had CJ Stroud, would you like them to win a championship? Now, I think if you put CJ Stroud on the Michigan team, I obviously give them a better chance to beat Ohio State. But I don't know that I would pick them to win a national title, because I don't think their receiving core is what you would need it to be to win a national championship. I think that's, first of all, you're taking away the quarterback run, which is a big part of the Michigan offense. So there's an area in which you're making the Michigan offense worse, and that's the area that Jim Harbaugh really likes. I think there's a decent possibility if you asked both coaches which quarterback would you take and got an actual honest answer and not just I'll take my guy, in the way that Greg Schiano would be like, no, give me Noah Vedral. I believe in my guy. Actually, honestly, I would believe in my guy thing. I think there is an argument to be made that J.J. McCarthy is a better fit for the Michigan offense that Jim Harbaugh wants to run than C.J. Stroud is. Now, I don't know that makes it the best offense that Michigan could run, but the one that Jim Harbaugh chooses to run, J.J. McCarthy is a better fit. I think C.J. Stroud makes them a more explosive offense. I think there is a way you could put C.J. Stroud in there and run an offense that probably scores a touchdown more a game or something like that than the J.J. McCarthy led offense right now. But ultimately, the offensive line is probably national championship caliber. The running backs are national championship caliber. The defense is, we'll see. They have not really been tested, but I think they're at least in that conversation. I just think the wide receiver unit, it's fine, but, you look at the wide receiver units that have won national championships. Georgia's wasn't incredible last year, but their defense was a lot better than Michigan's is this year. Georgia's defense last year was a lot better than pretty much any defense I've ever seen outside of maybe a couple of the Nick Saban ones. So they're a little bit of an exception. I don't quite believe in the Michigan receivers and tight ends enough to think that they're going to be able to, is Michigan passing for 400 yards a game or 350 yards a game if CJ Stroud's there? I don't think the receiver talent is quite there to do that.
No, and I do think you would see more downfield attempts, but if they're unsuccessful, then they're going to draw those back. And it's not going to be unsuccessful because of CJ Stroud. It's going to be unsuccessful because of the receiver talent. There is no Marvin Harrison that you can throw a fade into. I don't know how many back shoulder stuff they can do with these receivers. And I go back to last week or the week before when I asked Julian Fleming, Ohio State receiver, why don't we see many why doesn't Ohio State throw 50-50 balls? And I said, is it because you guys are open and you don't need him? And he's, basically that's one of the reasons. At Michigan, I think CJ Stroud would have to throw more 50-50 balls. So he's going to have more incompletions. He's going to have more interceptions. I don't know who those guys are, and I think I wrote about that in Michigan Monday. Like, who is the guy that can be in the end zone and make plays? Because J.J. McCarthy does not want to throw the ball into the end zone, or is not allowed to. And it's because, well, I think one of the reasons is who is that guy that will bring it down? Who can you count on? And I think you would run into that problem with CJ Stroud as a quarterback as well. I do think it would be interesting to see what CJ Stroud would look like running the ball on called runs 5 times a game like JJ McCarthy does. I think JJ McCarthy is a much more dynamic runner, but CJ Stroud has the kind of touch that would make that offense better able to, I think, score in the red zone, even without that running aspect of it. I do think touch would be a much better weapon than the hammer that JJ McCarthy throws with. But when you said I think both coaches would choose their guy, I kind of agree with that, and not just some bravado thing. But I think CJ Stroud could do okay in that offense, but he feels like a transfer candidate after 1 year.
Yeah, that just doesn't feel like a great stylistic fit. It might work and be okay, but it just doesn't feel like, just two people who are not seeing eye to eye is kind of how I would view that. Next one from Out Hiking. Which of our opponents this year are most like Michigan's offense scheme-wise, and which is closest to the Michigan defense? Well, yeah, I reached out to our scheme guys, and Devin Radcliffe is a defensive coach by trade, so he looks at the offenses, and he immediately said Notre Dame and Wisconsin are the most similar scheme-wise on offense to what Michigan does. And, that makes sense. Those are teams that are run-heavy, tight ends, but actually have a scheme, so, like, better than Iowa. And so, but, and I'm sure you now as a listener, dear listener, are saying, so 10 points, and what did Wisconsin score? 14? Something like that? Well, Michigan's talent is significantly better than either of those teams on offense this year. So that was, I don't think just because they held Notre Dame to 10 points, they're going to hold Michigan to 10 points. So, but some of the ideas that are expressed by the Notre Dame offense and the Wisconsin offense are similar to the ones that Michigan is going to run. So, and on defense, it was kind of like, I don't know, the Ravens, which, that's where they got their defensive coordinator from. So that makes sense. But, I don't know that there is necessarily a great answer, a great analog on the defensive side of the ball to what Michigan's doing.
No, and they do. It's a different kind of defense. I would say, Tom, maybe Vanderbilt, since that is where their defensive coordinator come from. So go watch a bunch of Vanderbilt film and see if that makes you feel better about how Ohio State is going to do against Michigan. But yeah, they're different and not easy to compare to.
All right, from at ACS236, based on what you've seen from both teams so far, how do you think the game will be different this year? I'm not talking about who wins, but rather what the teams will try to do and how they'll try to stop each other.
How do I think the game will be different? I think the attacks will be very similar because that's who these two teams are and that's who these two offenses and defenses are, although Ohio State's defense is different this year. I think Ohio State will obviously want to be physical and show that they can be physical in this game. You think back to the rematch with Clemson when they focused on that for a year and came out and were the more physical team and really took it to Clemson. That was Ryan Day. That was his team. And this is a similar situation. They've heard everybody. They've heard the jokes. They see how dismissive people are. You talked on the previous Buckeye Weekly episode of how defensive Ryan Day was about a running game right now that is struggling. So they hear all of that. They see all of it. They maybe internalize it, use it, turn it into fuel. And so I think they will try to run the ball and be more physical. They will be more physical than they were last year. Will they be able to block properly and get those yards? And will the running backs be healthy enough? Tell me, is Mayan Williams 90%, 95%? I'd feel a lot better about giving you an answer on how Ohio State is going to look in that game.
Yeah, my assumption is Mayan Williams is probably back and healthy-ish for that game. I mean, you've got another 3 weeks to get healed up, so I would assume you're going to see maybe not 100% Mayan Williams, but a closer to 100% Mayan Williams for that game. And I think to me, the two things that are going to be different this year are, without having access to the long-range forecast, I will say that the weather will probably not be as bad as it was last year for the game, where it was windy and it was snowing and cold and all of that stuff, which means that will probably make Ohio State a little more able to pass the ball. And, so that I think would be a positive for Ohio State. The other thing that I think is a positive for Ohio State is Jim Knowles is here, and it's not the Matt Barnes / Kerry Combs show on defense, which, you look at the results this year, and they are a substantially better team, on defense, but especially against the run. They're substantially better against the run. And that's what Michigan's going to want to do. And yes, Michigan got 42 points, and yes, Hassan Haskins ran for 5 touchdowns last year. I would be fairly surprised if Blake Corum ran for 5 touchdowns this year. I would be fairly surprised if Michigan got to 42 points. Now, I'm not even at the point where have even thought about starting to make a game pick. And I said on one of the previous shows this week that I walked out of Beaver Stadium thinking that Ohio State was, maybe, the stuff that I was seeing from Ohio State was maybe going to make me believe that they lost to Michigan this year. And then I watched the Michigan State game, and it was not so fast, my friend, when you watch Michigan bog down in the red zone. If if the Ohio State run defense does not get run over like they did last year, and Michigan's bogging down in the red zone, can J.J. McCarthy win the game? And, Michigan's quarterbacks did not have to win the game last year, and Michigan's secondary did not have to defend against downfield passes last year because of the weather and the pass rush. And I'm not sure either of those things hold true this year. So I think that's going to be, those are going to be two rather significant differences. Next one, and, this is a smooth transition, at 14er Vibes. 3 reasons why Ohio State wins and 3 reasons why Michigan wins based on the season so far. Do you want to start, or do you want to take one of the teams and I'll take the other one? What do you want to go? Because I could answer either one of these.
I'll give you 3 reasons why Ohio State wins.
Okay.
1.
3 reasons why. You're going to. Oh, sorry. When you said I'll give you, I thought you meant you would let me go. You go ahead, please. You give me. Yes.
Can I speak? 3 reasons why Ohio State will win. 1, CJ Stroud, and he has played well in the fourth quarters of games where the decision is in doubt. We've seen that. Did that even against Michigan. Throws for 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Was sacked. Was harassed. Look at what he did against Utah. He is now, I think, seasoned enough and toughened enough, and has come through and is calm and comfortable, and the team believes in him. My next reason would be Jim Knowles. I think the new defense, the running game, the run defense is better, but also the pass defense is better. So I think last year you could see this defense get tested by Michigan's running game or passing game. Now it's different. It doesn't mean Michigan can't run or throw on them. It just means it's a much different animal. And any different animal than the animal last year is one of the reasons why Ohio State can win this one. And then the third, I'll just say the Michigan back 7. I'm not sure about them yet because they haven't really faced anything like this. And we've seen them struggle with tempo. The entire defense struggles with tempo. So I'll just say that just the up-tempo stuff when, as Brian Day has said this week, with the changing speeds, where that will give Michigan, I think, some trouble, and they'll be able to execute with Ohio State's superior receiving skill.
Yeah, those are 3, I think, very good reasons. I'll give you the 3 reasons for Michigan winning. Number 1 is Michigan's got a real good offensive line and a real good defensive line. And typically, if you are the better team in the trenches, you've got a pretty good chance to win not just the Ohio State-Michigan game, but any game. And I think the Ohio State defensive line is great. And, I think the strongest of those 4 units is probably the Ohio State defensive line, and with the Michigan offensive line being a close second. But you can convince me otherwise. And good news, we'll find out together on November 26th. But I think that's going to be a real strength versus strength matchup. And the Ohio State offensive line has been they were very good at the beginning of the year, and they've kind of just been okay the last few weeks, and Michigan has gotten real consistent pressure with their defensive front this year in passing situations, but you haven't been able to run against them. They've been able to get really good consistent pressure in passing situations. So, if you are going to go run, pass, you're not going to get very much, and then you're in an obvious passing situation and you're in a bad spot. So, Ohio State's going to have to get away from the run, pass thing against Michigan. And, I think that's number one is, I have some concerns in the trenches on the Ohio State offensive line side of the ball. And number two, Blake Corum. Like, Blake Corum is real good. Blake Corum is very hard to tackle. And, if he has shown that if the hole is not there where he's going, he's got great vision and can find it. So if you're not extremely gap sound, that could be a problem. If Blake Corum, you could see Blake Corum running for, having a, Chris Perry 2003 kind of game. Like, I don't remember what Chris Perry did. I don't remember where he ended up at 180 yards or something like that. It wasn't, it wasn't a Tim Biakabatuka game, but it was a very good, you score, you rip off a long one, but you keep the chains moving, you hold on to the ball, you keep the Ohio State offense on the sideline. And that's, that crowd at Ohio Stadium, if things are going well, that crowd is really going to cause stuff to snowball on Michigan. If stuff is not going well for Ohio State, you have been inside stadiums where, you have everyone's on fire at the beginning of the game, and then you get that real nervous energy later, and it can actually be a detriment to the home team. If Michigan's able to keep the Ohio State offense off the field and keeps picking up third downs, I think you could have stuff, snowball a little bit on Ohio State there. So, and third, I don't know, if this comes down to a field goal, would you bet against Jake Moody? Jake Moody has been, Noah Ruggles has been really good. He missed one, and it was like a 54-yarder, and he didn't miss by much at Penn State. Jake Moody has been he's hit from wherever. He has been very consistent. If this comes down to a field goal, I would say, my money would be on Jake Moody making that from wherever it is. So with as close as that game potentially could be, and with as much as both teams have bogged down in the red zone at times this year, and probably will in this game, it could turn into a field goal kicking contest to some degree at least. I think Jake Moody is potentially a difference maker for Michigan there.
I'm so disappointed that you went field goal kicker. Tom, these are two dynamic offenses who eschew the field goal at any time. Any possible opportunity, they're like, no, we're going for it. We don't thrive or survive. We don't need field goals. Tom, frankly, you disgust me.
Yeah, I can't even think of the last time Jim Harbaugh kicked 5 field goals in the last 4 calendar days. It's been ages, Tony. Forget it. Next one from @GoBlueGif. If Michigan wins, does that mean Day, who was on third as a pinch runner, gets thrown out at home trying to score on a sacrifice fly? Tony, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Tom. I did see somebody sent me a DM or something of a Spirit Halloween costume, the meme of the Spirit Halloween costume, and it had a picture of Ryan Day, and it said third baseman, and I was like, oh, you were so close. I don't think that's what Jim Harbaugh meant when he said Ryan Day was born on third base. That's like, Jim Harbaugh, I'm sure, respects a third baseman. Like, yes, that's the hot corner. This is a guy who takes a glove to a baseball game in the stands. He respects the need to be prepared for a hot shot right down third baseline. So I think this is a disrespectful comment, and so that costume did not fit. But a solid analogy in terms of those who are born on third base, losing a game, getting thrown out at home. I don't know. It could just be that could just be the third out. The flyout could just be the third out.
Could be. It's almost like if Major League Baseball in extra innings put the runner on third instead of second. Maybe that's the better analogy for what Jim Harbaugh was trying to say. Next one from Glasswing Butterfly. What player on Michigan, if he didn't play for some reason, would make the most positive effect on the game for the Buckeyes? Don't worry, I'm not planning to go all Tanya Harding on anyone. Just wondering if there's a linchpin player. Thanks in advance. To me, Tony, I think this is the most basic answer you could give. But Tony, is it not J.J. McCarthy? Where I think, J.J. McCarthy to Cade McNamara, you lose all of the running ability, and I don't know that you really gain much in the passing realm. Blake Corum to Donovan Edwards, maybe, But, Donovan Edwards has been pretty good as well. I feel like if the threat of the quarterback run isn't there, and the threat of the downfield pass isn't really there, I don't know how well Michigan does. And yes, I recognize, just to head everything off, yes, I recognize that Cade McNamara led Michigan to a 42 points and a win over Ohio State last year. We've addressed some of the reasons why this year is different than last year earlier in the show.
Tom, never take my points away from me when I'm going to make you look like an idiot. Okay? Just please allow me to have my moments. But initially you're thinking, well, it's Blake Corum because he's their best player. But I think Donovan Edwards is also very good. Right now, I don't even know if Cade McNamara is healthy enough to play. I don't know what his situation is. So if it's like J.J. McCarthy to, I don't know, Alan Bowman, is he still there? Alex Orji? I mean,
yeah, that would probably not go well. I don't. What was the line in 2020? 30 points? Probably not 30 points, but if you're dropping from J.J. McCarthy down to a third stringer who has not played much this year, that seems like that's going to be a real big problem.
And as we know, Tom, Ohio State does not lose to backup quarterbacks, especially backup quarterbacks in the state of from the state of Michigan. Doesn't happen. That's they. Not from the state of Wisconsin, not from the state of Illinois, not from the state of Michigan. They do not lose to backup quarterbacks. And so I would think if you remove J.J. McCarthy from that, I would agree with you, even though the answer everybody else is going to say is Blake Corum, but there is more to it. And it's Cade McNamara at this point. I think defenses would rather face him. Like the drop off there is such that that's the guy you would choose.
All right, and the last one from Aaron M1, and I've already answered this one earlier, so you can share your thoughts. How does the Ohio State defensive line match up against Michigan's offensive line?
Like you said, Tom, those are the two best lines of the matchup, and we will get to see who is better. I like the matchups with, I think, the edges maybe a little bit better than the interior, even though my call versus Oluwatimi will be very interesting, and there's some interior stuff where I think Michigan is strong there. They've got good pass rushing. What constitutes a win for Ohio State? Is it sacks? Is it 3.1 yards per carry? Like, I think you need both. And is it just containing J.J. McCarthy from keeping him? If he has no yards rushing, to me, that's as much a win as if he has you've got 3 sacks. Like if you just keep him contained, and so that's not a line of scrimmage matchup necessarily, but it is a containment issue. So I think the Ohio State defensive line there, and along with some help from the linebackers, can that's going to be key. But man, that's a tough one because the offensive line is really good. The defensive line, the rotation, it's just like, how often does Larry Johnson, how often do the right guys come in and the fresh guys come in, and how effective can the fresh guys be? But it's an even matchup, I think. So how do they match up? I think they both match up decently against each other because they're both very talented. But how does iron match up against iron? Sparkly? I mean,
Sparks, yes. I think, to me, I'm looking at yards per carry for Michigan. That's what I'm looking at. And that can be Blake Corum, that can be J.J. McCarthy. If Michigan's at, 4 yards a carry or anywhere around there, Ohio State's defensive line has done its job, and Ohio State is probably winning the game. If it's over 5, 5.5, 6, you're swinging the pendulum back to Michigan. Whether that's Michigan 55-45 or Michigan 90% likely to win the game. It's anything above 5, I start swinging the other way. So that's how I'm defining who wins that matchup, is what's Michigan's yards per carry in that game. And I think there's, between the Jim Knowles scheme this year and how well the Ohio State defensive line and then linebackers behind them are playing, I think that is a real legitimate question. How much better Ohio State is going to play against Michigan's offense this year.
All right, that will then do it, as we've now gotten through all of the questions. It only took 4 episodes, but we have done it. I knew we could do it. I wasn't sure we could do it actually, but we've done it. So Want to thank you all for those questions. And again, we will be asking for more down the road. And as always, you are free to send them in whenever you want. Tom, I do have some that I have not been able to include, but we will get to those. Just know that we see them, we appreciate them, and we'll get to them when we can. But that will do it for today. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.